if you bought anything in 2010 and you still own it today, you crushed it. You crushed it even if you never made $1 off of it. It's worth 10x of whatever you paid for it back then, especially if you were buying at the foreclosure sale.
You're listening to Alternative Investor Mastermind, where we do a deep dive on alternative investment opportunities and the lifestyle it can create. Join Jack Krupe as he presents actionable tips and tricks in doing passive real estate away from mainstream strategies. Go beyond the usual fix and flips and try less explored yet rewarding investing ventures. From multifamily properties, mobile homes to cryptocurrencies. Do not miss this opportunity to escape traditional assets and finally create wealth without Wall Street. Now your host, Jack.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Alternative Investor Mastermind. Really excited about today's episode. Got a buddy of mine, Robert Crager here. Robbie, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man.
So Robbie, you've been in real estate a really long time, just like I have. Tell us your story. How did you get started?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I got started because I was a bad employee, which is a pretty common thing for entrepreneurs, right? We don't work well as being told what to do, or at least I didn't. I had a pretty good high-paying job for a 6-month period of time. Had a bit of an altercation with my direct supervisor, and the writing was on the wall that it wasn't going to be for me. So within like a 2-week period of time, I quit my job, bought a house, had no money, had no credit, did everything the hardest way that I could possibly do it. And I never looked back. And I haven't ever worked for someone in that capacity again, right? Like, so we do partnerships now. And I think I work way harder and way more, and we can talk about that as we go through. But I have a sense of freedom. I have the idea that at least I can look in the mirror and know if something goes well, it's because we did it right, we did it well. If something goes wrong, I'm looking right at the guy in the mirror and saying, what the fuck? How do we fix it, right? I know exactly who to look to, who to blame, and so I just like that. I feel security through that. I never bought into the idea of working for someone was going to give me security.
That's great. You glossed over something that's pretty amazing. You just I bought a house with no money. Let's dive into that a little bit, because I bought one of those books on no money down real estate, and I found my college landlord who was a mentor of mine, and he sort of guided me. Yeah. How did you buy that first house with almost no money?
Yeah, so it's a pretty cool story, because I was like you said, I was leaving a job or leading up to leaving a job. Obviously, there's a lot of stress with that. I had a couple kids. I had a wife. I knew that I was going to have to continue to provide. My wife had a job, so at least we were going to eat. But I was up late. I was watching TV. There was an infomercial on every single night at around 2 a.m. It was a guy named Carlton Sheets, and he was amazing. And he put out these infomercials where he said, you can buy real estate with zero money down and anybody can do it. And then he would immediately have Mr. and Mrs. Smith, come in and say, we bought Carlton Sheets' course and it changed our life, right? And so me being the knucklehead that I was young, I was dumb. I didn't even buy his course, but I took him at his word. I swear, Jack, I looked at that television. I'm like, if Mr. and Mrs. Smith can do it, and so can the 8 other people that have come in and said that Carlton changed their life, if they can do it, then so can I. And it gave me the kind of courage. I do tend to be a little impulsive. I jumped in with both feet, like with no real plan. I literally burned the office job I had, told them they could, go pound sand, and quit my job on like a Monday. And I'm scouring the newspapers for a property, and really had no money. I borrowed $3,000 from my wife, and it was like the last $3,000 that she had. And I partnered with a couple guys who also put in $3,000, so we had $9,000 between us, and we bought a house using a hard money loan from a property wholesaler. Probably didn't get a great deal. Bought it in the worst neighborhood. Did everything ourselves. Like we went in with the idea that the $9,000 needed to renovate the house, and so this is back in the mid '90s, and that was actually possible back then. But it was a disaster. I was the least skilled of the other two. At least they had some construction experience, so I ended up being the labor guy holding the bucket. And I did that one time. That partnership, it never went anywhere. We did that one house. I ended up several months later buying everybody out after I'd bought the next house. So I could talk about that story, but it was it was a disaster. It was my best friend and his father-in-law and myself. And so they started to kind of butt heads pretty quickly, and it just fell apart really fast. I ended up taking over, and I ended up staying in the business, and neither of them did, right? And that was how that went.
Gotcha. So you took over the house. Did you actually flip it, or did you just keep it as a rental?
So I eventually sold it and did make money, but it took me years. It became a rental because I had no choice. We struggled to finish the job. We struggled to sell it after we were finished with it. It was in a bad neighborhood. It kept getting broken into. It was what a learning experience, right? Like, it was just a calamity.
Yeah, well, it's no better way to learn.
Yeah, that's like
School
learned
of Hard
by the
Knocks.
firing squad, right? The School of Hard Knocks, yeah. So anybody who thinks, I hear stories of people who get into real estate investing and everything goes well for them. I'm like, wow, that's tremendous. It didn't work that way for me.
Yeah, in a way, it's a privilege to have paid your dues, and I certainly paid some of mine in 2008. But yeah, there's only one way to learn those lessons, and I know a lot of people the last 10 years have kind of caught an upswing, and when as rates have moved the last couple of years, really the first time there's been challenges for many people in their real estate career, those that haven't been in for more than 10 years.
Yeah, so we were in it, like I said, mid-90s, and so by the time you're talking about in 2008, we had incredible success. Like it got better and better and better, and I had a couple of businesses that did really well, and I would have a big net worth, and then we would break up and it would fall back down. And so I thought a few times that I think I thought one time that I had lost my net worth. Like at 30, I thought, okay, I'm a millionaire, right? I had on paper, it was bullshit. I didn't have $1 million, but it looked like I did. And the business goes bad. And so around 2000, I started a new business, and it got really good. And like 2006, 2007, I now was definitely a multimillionaire, had a big net worth, like a $15, $20 million net worth. And by the summer of 2008, I was penniless broke. So that's
it's amazing how things can shift. But let's go back to the late 90s a little bit, though, again. So you buy them out of the first house, you bought a second one. How long was the path to getting stable, from quitting your job and being stressed to, at least getting at the point where you felt like your head was above water and you knew you were going to be able to stay full-time in the business?
This is what I did. So I quit my job, bought that house. It was a company called RealNet, Real Estate Investors Network. They were a wholesale group, and I went to work for them. So I bought that house from them, and then I just started showing up at their place and said, hey, I want to work for you guys. I went to work for them, and I was selling the retail houses. So real estate investors would buy from them, fix them up, and then they'd hand them back to me, and I would sell the fixed up houses. So I probably started making money through brokering deals within 30 to 45 days. It was a pretty quick window, right? Like, you hear back in the day, if you're going to go into real estate, you needed to have 6 or 8 months. I didn't have 6 or 8 months. I needed to make money right now. And thankfully, God provided a way for me to do it. Also, I bought my second house from the RealNet company before we were even like halfway through with the first. So like, bought a house, that first one, month and a half later, I bought my second one without the first guys. And now I'm borrowing all of the money. So really had no money at this point, but I met some investors at RealNet. They showed me the house. They would lend me the money, and I just had to get the work done. And that house made money. That second one, we made like $14,000. And I can remember it because it was a full flip. We did a full renovation, and I was already selling houses retail. So I just put my house that I was renovating on the list of houses that I would sell retail. And I took this girl around. I showed her a house she couldn't afford. I showed her a house that was a disaster. And then I showed her my house, and I said, you can pick the floors, you can pick the paint. And then I ended up selling it to her and allowing her to have that input and making that money. And that was a pretty quick. Once I had done that, once I figured that out, it was I don't want to say smooth sailing because I had the ups and downs, and again, penniless broke in 2008, but it went pretty well for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's great. What I'm hearing is, you found a way to create value. You showed up on this company's doorstep, and you wanted to find a way to create value for them. And in exchange, what a great way to learn the business.
Yeah, and it was a great time. So there were some guys there that I still do business with, right? Some really smart guys that had been in the business longer than me. I'm showing up. I'm a little young and green and naive, and I was super, super aggressive. Like, I would go and sit in their meetings where they would talk about the acquisitions that they would get. And if you know wholesaling, you contract something and you're trying to flip it. And there would always be a set of properties that they were going to lose, that they weren't able to sell to the investor network, right? And I would always raise my hand and say, I'll buy it. And I had this guy, Paul, who would lend me the money. And so I wasn't taking the cream of the crop. I was letting them try to sell it. So they were selling all the really good deals, but I would buy the stuff that was just marginal enough, as long as I thought I could make money with it. And as long as I could convince Paul to give me the money. And so we did, I don't know, we probably did 10 deals that way before I left RealNet. That's the other thing. I didn't stick with RealNet very long either. I went out on my own, and I kind of let them know that I was there to learn the business and I was going to go out on my own. And that was what we did.
Great. And then I know you bought a lot at the auction. Were you also doing a lot of like postcard marketing back then, or?
Oh God, yeah. So after I left RealNet, we started doing the bandit signs. We started doing the postcards. We had a mailer. We would do all of that to try and get the phone to ring with distressed sellers, and then we would contract their properties, and we would either close on them or just wholesale them. So I learned this wholesaling business from RealNet, and where I really differentiated myself pretty early on was I figured out that if I could sell the story that, hey, you're getting all of these postcards from people who are just going to try and flip your house to someone else, I'm going to actually close on it. And that was my script. I'm telling you, I'm offering you 30 grand. They're offering you 35 grand, but they're just going to try and pass it on to the next buyer. I'm really going to close. Like, I'll show up next Tuesday and we'll buy the house. And that worked for me for years. I did like 100 deals a year for a long time. And then we started going to the foreclosure sale. And there were several sort of ways that we were doing business. When I first started, we were preying on bad realtors and then doing the postcards, and then we ended up doing foreclosure sales and tax deed sales. So that there was a whole bunch of things that I sort of learned along the way.
Yeah, and you said you had a couple different businesses. Are you describing them as each different business, or did you also have a general contracting company, or what other businesses did you?
I had retail sales, like a brokerage business, which I hated that business, but I had it for years and years. We had a mortgage-based business for a long time, where I bought a property where the guy was ready to move to, I think, Costa Rica, and he sold me an insurance business and a mortgage business. And so we bought both of those things, and I flipped the insurance business. I kept the mortgage business. And I bought his building and then sold the building. So
Gotcha. Was this early 2000s mortgage business?
This is probably early 2000. Yeah, this is like probably 2001, 2002. Yeah.
So, yeah, must have had quite a run in the mortgage business, or at least a roller coaster.
The mortgage business was a lot of fun, and I ended up selling the mortgage business to a business partner, and we separated around 2004 or 2005, and he got an amazing run and was killing it, and then by 2008, it was dead, right? So yeah, that being in real estate from 2000 to 2005, it was like you couldn't miss. You just couldn't miss. And it was so rapidly going up in Orlando, Florida. I can remember back in 2005 going to the foreclosure sale, thinking we're buying at 80 cents on the dollar, with the thought that, well, by the time we finish this 30 or 60 days from now, when we're done with the renovation, it's going to be worth another 5, 6, or 10% more. And it was sick. It was crazy.
Yeah, and then you mentioned earlier that soon after that is when the real challenges happened. Went from being a multimillionaire to almost losing everything.
We lost everything. I lost the Hummer. I lost the house. I can remember in 2007, probably sometime early in 2007 or mid 2007, my wife sees that I'm not sleeping at night and finally just says, what's going on? And I'm like, look, it's as bad as it can be. And we're getting the foreclosure notices. And so she's starting to figure it out. And we ended up leaving that house. And there was a day that I can point to that I was coming from Tampa, Florida, back to Orlando, pulling my friend's boat, and my expedition said 0 miles to go on the meter, and gas at the time was like $5 a gallon or something, right? And I had scraped all of the change, had no money. I pulled over to the gas station and a guy gave me $10 to fill up to get home. And I filled the $10 into the gas tank. It still said 0 miles to go. I called my wife, said, here's where I am on the street. If I'm not home in an hour, that means I've run out of gas. You've got to find somebody to give you some money and come and get me. And she was like, okay. So, and then I was literally driving home on an open to prayer and praying the whole time, like, Lord, get me through this. And, let me learn this lesson. This was my prayer. Lord God, please, whatever you're trying to teach me, let me learn it this one time. Don't let me be as bullheaded as I've been in the past. I just really need to learn this lesson this one time. And from that day, it was months, by the summer of 2008, we were back in business with a friend who came that had some money, and we started buying foreclosures again. So we just sort of hit it right at the right time. I went broke before the rest of the world went broke. And because I went broke before the rest of the world, I got to come out of it mightily, right? It was an amazing way that God timed things for me. It had zero to do with Robbie Crager. It had really to do with God and his timing. And
yeah, that's incredible. That's an incredible story. And I remember, my challenges, and I really had nothing to lose. I got started relatively right out of college, but I just remember that stress of 2008. It took me a couple of years to really get my confidence back. How did you recover and have just like the mental strength to dive back in so quickly?
Yeah, that was, I think, a complete God thing. So we started to go broke in the summer of 2006, which is 2 years before everybody else. But before the world had their problems, it was like somebody had turned the water faucet off for me. Up through summer of 2006, we were crushing it. I thought at the time I was making NBA money, right? Like it was just like we were printing money. I knew there was something bad that was going to happen, but it happened so fast for me that I just didn't sleep for 2 years. I would literally go to bed thinking, tomorrow I need to figure out how to have $5,000 to pay Jack. And I would manage to get that done. And then the next day I'd be thinking, I need to have $7,000 next Friday to pay Don. And that's the way I lived for 2 years until we were absolutely penniless broke. And so how I got back in it was a friend of mine said, Robbie, you're really good at this. I know you're going through some hard times, but I've got some money and I see things as going bad. Let's go to the sale and start buying things again. And so we did. We showed up summer of 2008 using my friend Scott Franklin's money. He had a few $100,000, and we started flipping houses. And then the market was doing this, right? So by the time it hit bottom in like 2010, we had made so much money. We were buying and selling fast, and we had a pile of cash now in 2010 and just sort of hit it perfectly. And at the time, we changed our business model from a buy and sell to a buy and hold. And so I still have some homes that we bought in 2010, which you can imagine, if you bought anything in 2010 and you still own it today, you crushed it. You crushed it, even if you never made $1 off of it. It's worth 10x of whatever you paid for it back then, especially if you were buying at the foreclosure sale.
Yeah, absolutely. So with hindsight being 2020, and obviously Florida was the epicenter of the crash, the 06 to 08 crash. Yeah. Do you think it was inevitable? Is there, other than having no debt whatsoever and just stopping the business for a year, is there any way you could have avoided it, or what would you have done differently?
What would I have done differently? I would have called up everybody who I was trying to get the 5,000, the 7, and I would have said, listen, we're in trouble. We've lost our ability to sell these houses. We need to change the business model right now, and we're going to stick renters in there, and we're going to get the cash flow that we can, and I'm going to give you guys everything that I can give you above me eating. And I would have stopped the bleeding instead of just pouring out the cash. For me, I can mentally see it, and it wasn't like all at one time, but in my mind's eye, it's $2 million of money that I had that I ended up just dribbling and drabbling away. It's like I could have lit it on fire, where had I just stopped the bleeding and gone to my partners and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the business model a little bit, and we're going to figure this out, and we're going to get through this. We would have then rented those properties out, and I would have given away the lion's share of it, but I would have kept enough to eat, right? And that's what I would change. And that was that was that lesson that I think God was trying to teach me. He was one, trying to tell me debt was bad, because my business was debt driven in 2006 when it all went bad. We had about $85,000 a month going out in interest payments on about $6 million or $7 million worth of debt. I had
Hard money mostly, right?
hard money. I had like 20% of my cash in the deal, and I thought I had some equity. I thought I was safe. It was crazy bad. And interest rates were 12 to 16%. So it was really, really expensive. We went 10 years without ever borrowing money. And even to this day, we really don't borrow money. I sort of missed borrowing the 3% money. I'm kicking myself a little for that, because I wish I was told by some smart people that I should have done that. And I wasn't there yet. So, but that's what I learned. That was the lesson I learned, is like, debt's not really your friend. So be very careful with it. It can be good, but I wasn't using it well. I didn't have any revenues from the property I was buying. We were 100% buy, fix, and sell. So I didn't shift in my mind until after I'd gone broke that I needed rental properties, that I needed that passive income. That's another. If I learned two things, right? Debt is bad. Income is good.
It's also way more tax efficient.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I haven't had a tax problem since I lost all that money. I had the loss carry forward for a long time. So even though we were coming back and making a lot of money, we were doing $500,000-$600,000 worth of a loss carry to offset $500,000 worth of income for years and years. Yeah.
Yeah. So great. So after 2008 to 10, catch a really good run. But then, and you were owning the auctions for a number of years, right? And then all of a sudden things change again when the hedge funds came into the business, right?
Yeah. So that's been the thing. In 26 years, we've done just about anything you could think of when it comes to buy and selling real estate. And we were definitely, you hear about the Good Old Boy Network. If you go to the foreclosure sale, pretty much anywhere in the U.S., you'll know that there's a set of people that kind of run the show there and that make it hard on anyone else that's new, right? And so I was part of that. I forced my way into that group and became a part of the Good Old Boys in Orlando, Florida, in Seminole County, Florida. And we had a really good run where no one could touch us for a little while. And then, like you said, these hedge funds started showing up, and they would just spend money, Jack. Like it just didn't matter to them. You know, something I wanted to spend $80,000 on, they'd spend $160,000 on it and think they're getting a good deal. And we thought for a while we could fight them. We cost them millions and millions of dollars bidding against them and running them up. And it just didn't matter. They had so much money that we couldn't ultimately, we were never going to win that battle. So we did try to figure out what it is that they're going to buy and, you know, look at the stuff that they're not going to buy so that we could still continue to eat. And the other thing that happened that was very fortunate for me is one of these hedge fund guys showed up at my house. I was working out of a garage apartment at my house, and a French guy, comes in with a friend of mine and says, "I hear that you're the guy at the Orange County foreclosure sale. I want to go to the foreclosure sale. Can you help me?" And I go through what we're doing. We've got spreadsheets. And he says, "All right, great. I've got $50 million. I'll put some money in an account." And, you hear that kind of thing all the time, right? So I told my friend Brandon, I'm like, "Yeah, we'll see if this guy's real." He says it on a Friday. By like next Tuesday, we've got an account set up and we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in there. And so for a couple of years, we bought like 650 houses for him across the state of Florida. And we were making money at a time where it was really hard for us to buy houses.
That's great. If you can't beat them, join them.
Exactly. And if you're going to show up at my house and tell me you got $50 million to spend, that's sort of like my dream job, right? Like this was incredible. So we did that for 3.5 or 4 years.
That's all for this episode of Alternative Investor Mastermind. Now that you know the many alternative opportunities out there all up for the taking, you can finally become ultra connected and ultra wealthy. Get more valuable advice from the experts by subscribing to the show at alternativeinvestormastermind.com. Become a winner in the world of passive investing today in alternative investment strategies. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.